they did the DNA analysis. And unsurprisingly, it turns out that he was more Mediterranean Caucasian, which is what we anticipate. That's what the people that live in that area today are. He was definitely a Judean. That is confirmed by the features. His features are absolutely Judean and Semitic. However, listen to this. His DNA contained variants that had disappeared from the human gene pool more than 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. In other words, 2,000 years ago, the population living there, these variants had already become extinct in that population.
So Jesus was an alien.
So this man was not a normal man, okay? And genetically. So
this is the Strange and Mysterious World podcast in conjunction with Elucis TV. These are your hosts, Lee Stridham and William Collinson.
Welcome to Strange and Mysterious World, Season 6, Episode 2. Tonight we have our Father Damon O'Bani back. This time we're going to be chatting about the Shroud of Turin. Quite a thing though. But I've got a couple of issues with that, with the shroud though, because it only came to surface in the 1350s in France. I think a place called Le Ray. And there was actually a French knight that brought it through. His name was Geoffroy de Charnay, I think his name was. And it stayed in France.
The Templars.
I don't know what type of knight he was. He was a French knight, so I don't know what the French knights were Teutons, weren't they? Teutonic, I think. But anyway,
they started the Templars.
The shroud eventually moved across to Turin. I think it was like in the 1700s, I think, or the 1500s. It moved across to Turin. So yeah, I'm keen to hear about it because they reckon it's very difficult to ascertain when it came from, what it came from, because there's so much different DNA, human DNA, different DNA from India to Africa to Middle Europe to.
Well, it was just like everyone just using it as a blanket, like everywhere it went.
Well, you must remember it's 1,300 years old when it came through. So how many people handled it? There's dog and chicken and cat DNA on there. There is pollen and other plant DNA. So it's, but Father says there's some new evidence, so that's going to be quite interesting to hear what's going on.
Okay, we'll introduce Father Damon so that the people that have never been on this podcast know who he is.
Well, if you haven't been on this podcast, shame on you. You should have gone back a long time to listen to us. But yes, Father Damon O'Bani is from the Liberal Catholic Church. He is our local father, fantastic guy, really knows his stuff, and is really advanced in his knowledge and understanding. So yeah, cool. Happy to bring him on.
But first, let's catch up with the latest paranormal news.
This is On the Fringe, your weekly paranormal news update from around the world with host Lee Stridham.
Good evening and welcome to On the Fringe. Tonight's story: paranormal influencer went missing during a live stream found weak in Malacca toilet. A man who went missing for more than 2 days was found in a weak state in a public toilet near Skytrax Adventure, Malacca, in the Botanic Gardens in Malaysia. Malacca Fire and Rescue Department Public Relations Officer Deputy Fire Superintendent Rashid said that the man, 34, was found by passerby at 3:03 p.m. and was sent to Malacca Hospital for further treatment. The fire department received a call about a missing man, and 2 fire engines from Ayakura Fire and Rescue Station with 7 firefighters were dispatched to the location in under a minute. The firefighters conducted a research at a resort around the Botanic Gardens, he said in a statement. Meanwhile, acting Malacca Tena District Police Chief Superintendent Abbas said that the victim, who was believed to have social media account, was reportedly conducting a live broadcast about paranormal activities at the resort at 8:30 p.m. on June the 19th, when the broadcast was cut short at 9 p.m. The victim's friend tried to contact the victim's phone and sent a WhatsApp message but did not receive any answer before the report about him going missing was lodged. Was this a hoax or a genuine paranormal event? We will soon see. And back to the show. Well, Father, welcome back, man. As per always, it's really cool to have you. And so we're going to be chatting about the Shroud. The Shroud of Turin. Tell us about it.
Yes, and the reason why that has actually come up again is because of recent scientific studies and the results that have come out from recent studies, new material, new science, which has shed amazing new light on the Shroud of Turin. And for your listeners who want to go in and get more detailed information about this, YouTube is just full of it. The Shroud of Turin, the latest information that's come, the new AI technology and technology that we have now in order to create 3D images out of the Shroud, etc. Amazing stuff really has happened. And so what we did at our church is we did a lecture very recently on the Shroud of Turin and on the recent information that's come out. You know, the thing is, people think that the Shroud of Turin was only known in the West, you know, from about the Middle Ages, etc. And then we have the situation it's been on display in the Cappella della Sancta Sidona in Turin, put on display every now and again. So it's always been there, right from the Middle Ages, right from the 15th century, etc. And but people don't realize that it actually has a documented history that goes right back to before the 4th century in the Eastern world, and we'll get into that just now. But the thing that made it important, because all it really is, it's a long piece of linen that is 4 by 4 meters long and 1 by 1 meters wide. So a long, slim strip of very old linen, and on it appears to be an ochre reddish-colored impression of the outline of a human being, front and back, because it was over his head and covering the back, of someone that has been traumatized and possibly crucified. And nothing else was able to be seen on it until very recently. In fact, it was first photographed in 1898. And that is where, for the first time, a negative image was seen that contained all this wonderful, marvelous imagery that actually stands out. It can't be seen with the naked eye, but when you take a photograph of it on the negative image, everything becomes visible, and very clearly so, breathtakingly so. And that was first noticed when it was first photographed in 1898. And the church has kept tabs on it since then. And there was in the 1978, there was a commission of inquiry that went in, and they did some investigations. And part of the investigation they did was they took a portion of this shroud, and they subjected it to carbon C14 dating. And the result that came back, it was from around about the 1200s or so. But what they didn't realize at the time was that the portion of cloth that they'd taken had been a portion of cloth that the nuns had worked on at that time in the 1400s, and they had woven cotton fabric into the linen. And it was that cotton fabric that did come from that period that was actually carbon C14 tested. And the church didn't want to give any more because, of course, with carbon C14, when you do a dating, you destroy the specimen. That's the whole point. And, of course, the church has been reluctant to allow them to cut any more of it. But it turns out they were testing the wrong piece. They were testing a piece that had been worked on, because this was almost destroyed and damaged in a fire in 1532. And so there was replacement parts put on it. But if we go back to the very origin of the recorded history of the shroud, it would obviously have originated in Jerusalem. And in the 4th century, it turns up in a city-state in what is now eastern Turkey, a city that today is called Urtu. And in the old days, in those days, was called Edessa. It was a city-state that was quite significant in those days because it sat on the camel route between the east and the west, the great import of goods and merchandise from the east into the west and back again, passed through that city. So it was a very powerful, very wealthy city-state. And we know, for example, in the 300s, there was a king called Abgar VIII who had acquired this particular thing, which was called the image of Edessa at that time. So at that time, this piece of cloth was called the image of Edessa, and it was very highly venerated. And it was actually paraded around in front of the people. And it was actually used during one of the numerous sieges that the city endured. It was held up, and all the enemy's siege engines burst into flames. So there were miracles associated with it. They kept it for several hundred years as a royal item in the house of Edessa, the royal house of Edessa. And it was documented, and people came from all over the place to see it. And so it endured, unfortunately, a lot of damage and acquired a lot of pollution on it, etc., especially contamination, human genome contamination, etc. Then we hear about it again when Edessa was besieged by the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire. And there was an Eastern Roman emperor called Romulus Lycurgus, and he knew that Edessa had this relic, very powerful relic. And he told them that he would conquer them if they didn't surrender the relic. And so they did surrender that relic, and that was in the 900s, and it went from there to Constantinople. So it was a relic in Constantinople of the imperial family of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. And then what happens? In 1204, we have one of the Crusades that goes through there, and the Crusaders, the Western Christians that were crusading, didn't consider Constantinople, an Eastern Christian country, as being sacred or anything, and they raided it. And they pillaged Constantinople in the year 1204, and they took this relic amongst many other relics. We believe that they also took the mummified head of John the Baptist at that time that was in Constantinople. And it was, in fact, it turns up in the hands of the Knights Templars. And the Knights Templars held this, and it actually, there are references to the Knights Templar venerating this shroud and venerating the severed head of John the Baptist as well. Remember when the Knights Templar were persecuted by the Church of Rome at the behest of the King of France, who was also the nephew of the Pope at that time. The Pope at that time was staying in Avignon, not in Rome. So France completely controlled the papacy at that time. And he owed the Knights Templar a very large amount of money. Okay, this was Louis the Fair. And the problem that happened is that he decided to persecute them, and there was evidence that they were not normal Christians as we would consider. They answered only and directly to the Pope. They did a lot of strange things that other churches and other orders didn't do. And one of the things they did was build up a huge banking empire, as I'm sure most people are aware. They actually invented checkbooks, checks, and they also invented the troy ounce as a measurement of gold. So they were very advanced with that kind of thing. And what happened was, when they lost their holdings in the Levant, in the Holy Land, Acre was their last city that they held on the coast of what is today Palestine. They withdrew to Rhodes, and from Rhodes to Cyprus, and from Cyprus then they were disbanded. And they took all of these things with them. And the next thing we hear, that it turns up in the hands of the church in 1532, which was the year in which it became damaged by fire. So this shroud has been known. It's not just recently that it's been known. It's got a documented history right from around about the 3rd and 4th centuries in the East. So when people came up, a lot of the people stated when it was carbon C14 dated, they said this was a forgery, probably done by Leonardo da Vinci, but this predates Leonardo da Vinci by more than 1,000 years. So obviously you can see that that is not 100% true. This has got a referenced history that you can actually go up and look at. And it was in the possession of the House of Savoy. Now, the House of Savoy today would be part of eastern France and northern Italy. Their capital was Turin. And of course, today that is in Italy. But in those days, it belonged to the House of Savoy, who was a very well-known noble and royal family in Europe. And it was their possession, and they actually built a special chapel for it, where it has stayed ever since. Now, since 1978, etc., there was the carbon C14 method said it was around about from the 1200s. No one took it very seriously from there until they started doing more testing. And we can do that now because we have 3D animation and things like that. And it was now recently, within the last few years, that more important discoveries were actually made with regards and reference to the Shroud of Turin. And the first thing that was made, because the Vatican, the Church, will not allow another carbon C14 dating, that they discovered was that the linen was in fact ancient. The linen was an extremely expensive form of linen, fishbone woven linen, and it definitely came from the Levant. It definitely came from Israel, Palestine, the Holy Land. It was woven there, and we know that it was there because it has got pollen from plants and flora that are only in that area. But the most amazing thing was that they found another piece of linen at Masada. Now, remember Masada was the Hebrew fort, the Jewish fort that was besieged by the Romans after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And the zealots held out there, and it was besieged, and eventually they ended up committing suicide just as the Romans were breaking in. And they found this linen. This linen was used to make the robes of the priests. And they found linen that compares exactly to that of the Shroud of Turin. Now, of course, the other important thing is that the negative image shows very clearly a man who is around about 6 foot tall, which was very unusual for the time. The average height in those days, around 2,000 years ago, was about 5'4", 5'6", between there. So a man of around 5'11" to 6 foot would have been extremely unusual. He was also very muscular. But this man had definitely undergone a number of wounds. There were, in fact, over 800 wounds documented on his body that showed up on the shroud. All of those wounds were consistent with the scriptural story of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. He was lashed with a Roman tribulation, a whip that divided into 3 sections and had lead and bone chips on the end, hooks that ripped flesh once you had been whipped with it. And he was thrashed back and front. After they'd thrashed his entire back, they turned him around and thrashed his entire front and ripped whole pieces of flesh away from that. He had definitely been crowned with a crown of thorns. It wasn't a circular crown like we picture the crown of thorns on crucifixions. It was a helmet. It was like a basket that had been woven and placed on his head, so that everywhere on his head there were wounds. His nose had been broken. His eyes had been damaged. Very importantly, he had the hairstyle of a Nazarene, with the one plait down the back and the hair down the front. This was a Nazarene, a Nazarite. Remember, we know the Nazarenes. They were specifically chosen holy people within ancient Judaism. Samson was a Nazarite. We believe John the Baptist was, and we believe that Jesus also was. And they took special vows of purity. They weren't allowed to do certain things and engage in certain things. And one of the things was that they never cut their hair. Well, this man, whoever the image on the Shroud of Turin is, was a Nazarene by that hairstyle that he had. Then there were other images. There were other things. His wrists had been pierced. He'd been crucified. There's no doubt about that. And the nail wounds were through his wrists, not through his hands. Now, we know, of course, that if anyone had been crucified through the hands, it would have torn free. So they would have crucified it between the ulna and the radius of the wrist. And the holes of those wounds were square. The Romans didn't use round nails like we get today. They used square nails. And those were definitely through his wrists, in his feet. His ankles were also pierced, but not the way it's generally demonstrated on modern crucifixes with one foot over the other. Rather, they were nailed to the sides of the pole, the vertical pole of the cross, through the ankles. Dreadful. They've actually found the bones of someone else that had been crucified from that time with the ankle bones pierced with a nail. So this would have been excruciating, if you can imagine it. He couldn't hold himself up. Then there's a few things that are giveaways. And some of those things that are giveaways are the coins that were placed over his eyes. Those coins were called leptons. And the particular leptons that they found over his eyes when you enhance the image are coins that were issued and minted by Pontius Pilate. So there's like very little doubt. The other things that they also found injuries to his shoulder, where he would have borne a heavy burden on the cross. And they found something else which one of my treasurer at church, thinks is actually the clincher. There's another clincher that I'm going to mention just now, a more scientific one. But one of the clinchers that they found was that on the knees, where the knees were, they examined that there was still soil from having fallen on his knees. And the soil samples that they had came only from Jerusalem. So this man was somebody that was crucified in Jerusalem around 33 AD, and he suffered all the tribulation that went with that, including the humiliation of being crowned with a crown of thorns, which most people being crucified would not have done. Remember, that was done in mockery, to mock him because he claimed to be the king of the Jews. So that wasn't something that was usually done. Remember also that crucifixion was reserved for the worst possible kinds of criminals within the Roman Empire. In fact, very much a slave's punishment for slaves that rebelled, because it's excruciating. And people could survive in that state for many, many hours. What actually happens is that you actually die from suffocation, because being held up like that, you can't hold yourself up with your feet because it's through your ankles. And so you start sagging down and your breathing is maligned, and you actually die by drowning on your own blood and your own fluids. By the way, there was also a wound in his side, consistent with having been stabbed with a spear, which is also consistent with scripture. But that's not the main clincher. The main clincher comes even with more scientific things, and there's two things. First of all, how was the shroud's image created? It wasn't painted. There's no brush strokes. It's not pigment, and it's not dye. So where does the image come from? Why has the image also retained where there is blood? The blood has retained its red color. Now, that only happens when there is a chemical released, or hormone is released into the blood called bilirubin. And bilirubin is released into the blood when something is severely traumatized. So this man had been severely tortured, severely traumatized, and his liver had released bilirubin into the blood, which is why to this day the Shroud of Turin, the blood marks on the shroud are red, and he is covered in blood, and there is blood all over the place. And they did an analysis of the blood, Lee, and what they discovered was it was AB. We're not sure if it was AB positive or negative, but it was type AB. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what they could determine from genetic material from that blood. But probably one of the most important things is how that image got onto there. Because as you know, it's a negative image, and they could not have done that. There wasn't the technology to do that. That negative image is also that has 3D information, 3D data in it. Because it was wrapped over his face, back and front, the back covering him, it would have been down the front and the back as a shroud. And because it was pressed down, it retained 3D imaging. Now, I want you to listen to the figures that I'm going to read for you. And this is sincere, this is real. You can go and you can look it up. It would have taken at least 10 billion watts of energy, tracking at a billionth of a second to change the chemical makeup and to leave the image as it did. In other words, a humongous, massive burst of energy, at least 10 billion watts, within a microsecond. Because if it had sustained that for any longer, it would have destroyed everything. But it was essentially a microsecond that this was radiated and then left. That is the only thing that it could have caused this reverse negative image at all. And that power does not exist on Earth. It didn't exist then. It actually does not exist now. So that is the ultimate clincher, is that this was produced with light radiation that was just not possible today. We can't replicate that kind of power and control it to that microsecond. Yeah, we're talking about a billionth of a second. A billionth of a second is no time at all. Think about it. It was irradiated for such a short period of time that one could wonder whether it was actually even a period of time. That is the only thing that could have recorded this image. Now, the residue that forms the image is only 0.02 microns thick on the surface, front and back of the cloth. 0.02 microns. It is nothing. And it can be scratched off with a knife. It's not paint, it's not pigment, it's not dye. This is a chemical reaction that happened in a split second with enormous amount of flash energy. So it can't be replicated. At one time they were saying, oh, it was a forgery. Only Leonardo da Vinci could have done it. This dates from long before Leonardo da Vinci. And no, there's no brush strokes or any such thing on it. So that is the ultimate clincher. Think about that. I'm going to read that again. 10 billion watts of energy at 1/40th of a billionth of a second. Think about that. That's like cosmic. That is energy on a cosmic scale.
Father, but this is what makes me question, because if he suddenly burst into light or whatever, like cosmically just disappeared with a huge energetic Kundalini awakening or whatever you want to call it, then he wouldn't have been resurrected.
Precisely.
There was no resurrection.
But something happened. What the point I'm trying to make is something happened that cannot be explained by science. We don't have that power. What is something that doesn't comply to natural law? What do we call it? We call it supernatural, don't we? And we know that energy like that is available on supernatural level. So something happened when this man resurrected. He had been dead. There's pre-morbidity blood and post-morbid blood on the shroud, and you can tell the difference between the two. Whatever this was, resurrected. And then we have the final one, and this one I also have to read, William, because to get it right, they did the DNA analysis, and unsurprisingly, it turns out that he was more Mediterranean Caucasian, which is what we anticipate. That's what the people that live in that area today are. He was definitely a Judean. That is confirmed by the features. His features are absolutely Judean and Semitic. However, listen to this. His DNA contained variants that had disappeared from the human gene pool more than 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. In other words, 2,000 years ago, the population living there, these variants had already become extinct in that population.
So Jesus was an alien.
So this man was not a normal man, okay? And genetically. So let's just read that again. Variants that had disappeared from the human gene pool thousands of years before his time.
So is that the Merovingians?
So this is a man that appeared there in Palestine, whatever you want to call it. It's not political. Whatever you want to call it. In Judea, he was a Judean. He was a Caucasian Mediterranean, like the people are there. But this man had variants in his genome that had been extinct for thousands of years. So where did he come from? What was this man? Wow. And of course, that is another one of the clinchers. So you've got three big clinchers here that I think, first of all, is the soil on the knees, which are only from Jerusalem. The blood types, AB, that came from that time that had bilirubin in it. The creation of this image, and then also this bizarre DNA that was unusual and out of place. And then taken in with all the other evidence, such as the coins on his eyes, the wounds which are absolutely according to the scriptural data as well. And the fact that he was humiliated with a crown of thorns, which was extremely unusual, and that he was thrashed, beaten to within an inch of his life, 800 wounds all over his body. In a court of law, in a modern court of law, all that evidence would be sufficient to tilt the scales in favor of a positive conclusion that this is authentic. So what I'm trying to talk about here today is we now have the scientific ability to actually measure these things and to actually come to a conclusion that this is special. And of course, it will always come down to a matter of faith. But something happened here. This man died, was dead, was put in a tomb, and then something supernatural happened. There was a flash of radiation that is inexplicable, is on a level and a magnitude and controlled in such a specific way that it would be impossible for us to duplicate. And then that matches very much closely to a resurrection. A supernatural event happened here and is recorded on this cloth. So it's possible that our good Lord took a selfie just as he resurrected. So, I mean, this is very interesting stuff, and people can ask questions and can question it. What I'm hoping is that it whets,
Father,
the appetite.
I sort of butt in there quickly. There is a theory that Jesus was actually, well, one of many theories, that Jesus was actually of alien origin. And they point right back to the beginning where the three wise men were following a star. A lot of people saying it wasn't a star, it was some sort of UFO that was guiding them to the place. That obviously as the years go on, there's certain things that happen in the life that is very kind of alien technology type thing. When he's just before he dies, when he's on the mountain and he's talking to Elijah, because remember Elijah went up while he was still alive, he went up to heaven in the chariot. He appeared,
yes.
So it's almost like a Star Trek thing where these guys appeared next to him and he was talking to them because his disciples saw it. And now you're explaining this whole radiation thing. Now that's obviously a UFO beam that beams down, because I mean that's what we know, that gives off heavy radiation.
Absolutely, but look at the DNA. Remember, according to scriptural belief, Jesus didn't have a human father. Jesus was conceived in Mary by the Holy Spirit. Yeah. And whatever the Holy Spirit did, it went back in time to look for genetic genes that would suit this particular individual. It's very, very pertinent and very important to note that the variants that are contained within that genetic material were already extinct in that area more than 5,000 to 7,000 years before. This is archaic genetic material. Okay, so even from that evidence, you can say this is someone special. Now, remember the whole issue about alien. It is also interchangeable with interdimensional. Is also interchangeable with alter dimensions. Is also interchangeable with stories like of the Anunnaki or whatever it is. It doesn't mean alien in terms we think of alien. When we say alien, we think of in terms of entities evolved in other solar systems other than ours, other planets other than ours, coming to our world. But there is a supernatural explanation as well. We know that we are surrounded all the times by multiplicity of
entities,
worlds,
beings,
precisely, and of those things. So these are very interesting questions. I mean, I think that the issue has come up in the Catholic Church today, where some of these great priests and exorcists are stating openly, in opposition to the Vatican, that aliens are demons. But we can expand on it and say, well, maybe these what we think are aliens are actually just interdimensional beings or beings from other dimensions, not necessarily from other stars or other planets. But that would actually tie into the traditions of Jesus, because Jesus is explained as a supernatural being, as a manifestation on earth of God the Son, who was conceived not in the normal natural way, but was conceived in a supernatural way. And here there's evidence of a very strange DNA variance in his genotype. And it's a cause for pause. So obviously I'm biased as a Christian. I might be a Gnostic Christian, but I'm still a Christian. I noticed that some of the comments from your viewers are stating that we're not Christians. We are. I am a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different kind. We might have a different perspective. But I think what is important is also to understand that we are surrounded all the time by alternate dimensions and realities. We just can't perceive them. With our limited 5 little senses, we can't even see reality. We have a very skewed and limited perception of reality. The light that we can interpret in our brain is a tiny little portion of the electromagnetic spectrum like this. We can't see X-rays or gamma rays. We can't perceive these things. We know they exist. Or microwaves in your oven. We know they exist, but we can't perceive them. And so much of reality we can't perceive. And so we have limited perspective. So yes, I am biased. I do believe that this is authentic myself. I believe that supernatural things can happen. I think that they happen all the time, but we just close our minds to them. We are open to alternative realities. Think about something that's come up recently. Sorry, I'm talking a lot here, but I just want to get some information.
That's fine. You carry on.
Think about something. We now know that most of the mass in the universe is dark energy that we can't even perceive. We worked that out mathematically. All the light and all the things that we are able to perceive doesn't make up for even 20% of all the mass in the universe. And now they're calling that we can't perceive as dark energy. Our own reality, our own physical reality is not completely explainable by science, by our own perception. And I think that this was authentic. I think that there was this visitation. I think that he was a manifestation of the divine. I think that this particular human body was created specifically to be able to endure the things that he was required to endure and to channel the energies he was required to endure, and that he was a very special person. And I believe that he did actually resurrect, and that this is photographic evidence of it having happened. So this isn't a new relic. This isn't a forgery from the Middle Ages. It's a well-documented relic right from the 3rd and 4th centuries in the East, in Edessa, in Constantinople, before it's taken to Europe. It is very old, and we now can see that the linen is authentic with the time. So are these things possible? I think all things are possible, to be honest with you, Lee. And yes, I am a priest, and I am a Christian priest, and so I have a bias for it. But I'm hoping that this whets the appetite of people so that they go and investigate it further. I can tell you now, the stuff on YouTube is amazing. How they can actually lift the image, the face and the image, out of that 2D into 3D is beyond belief. And you can actually have an image of what we think would have been, or the image of the man in the shroud, whatever you believe that was, whoever you believe that was. Scientific things are becoming provable now. We've got science, we've got AI. I've got a friend who was very ill, and he didn't know what it was. He was in pain, and he went into hospital, and they thought he had pneumonia. And after he had been discharged, he wasn't getting well, and he loaded into AI his symptoms, and AI told him to go immediately to the emergency room, that he's got thrombosis in his legs, and that it's probably going to be pulmonary thrombosis. He went into the hospital. They looked into it, and they found it. In other words, the hospital were not able to diagnose it.
Idiots.
AI diagnosed it. So, look, I'm not a great fan. I think it's a useful tool. I suppose it can also be used for negative things. But that's just an example that AI was able to diagnose him, and it was a correct diagnosis. So these scientific things are amazing. Now, we do have the science to be able to look at these things and enhance them. I mean, finding that those coins that were on his eyes, you remember the old tradition of putting coins on a person's eyes?
The riverman.
After they died, to pay the ferryman? No.
Yeah.
And so they looked at those coins, and they were leptons that were minted by Pontius Pilate.
Oh, that is
And
amazing.
of course, Pontius Pilate is very well documented. He was not a popular man, even in Rome. He was a very traumatized man, looking after a part of the world that was very, very in flux, in a state of flux and unstable. After the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, he went and he did a massacre in Samaria, and he was actually arrested by the governor of the Syrian province and sent back to Rome for judgment. And luckily for him, on his way back to Rome, the Emperor Trajan died. So this was a man that was not popular, that made a lot of mistakes. The Coptic Orthodox Church believes that him and his wife later converted and became martyrs for Christianity, just as a matter of interest. But whether or not you believe or that it is the image of Jesus on the Shroud of Turin, there are a lot of correspondences with the biblical stories, very much worthwhile considering. And so I'm hoping that your viewers will have their appetites whet by this, especially by what we call the clinchers, and go in and have a look, because there's really excellent presentations on this on YouTube. I only use YouTube. I don't really look at anything else.
Well, we'll try and put up some of those images you're talking about. You also sent us some. We'll put those up while you're talking.
Yes, I've seen some of them. I don't have that technological capacity to do fancy things in the background and that, unfortunately. I'm actually busy recording this with you on my phone. So you can imagine.
But
I
want to
don't
ask
have a laptop open. I've got my phone. Okay, and all of these, by the way, visits with you have been recorded on this phone. So, but I mean, I think that that's a very interesting thing. And so that's what I wanted to share with you.
Look,
another thing that has gotten a lot of evidence is something that I'm going to be doing a lecture on at our church for St. Michael Mass in September. And that, of course, is something that we've discussed before, Lee, which is the Younger Dryas, the Great Flood, which now the geologists call the Younger Dryas, which was a series of great floods. And a lot of evidence there is coming out that support the idea of a great flood or great floods and the destruction of a deluge high civilization, possibly even a global civilization.
Yeah.
So maybe we can discuss that at some point.
Yeah, we would love to do that. But I just wanted to ask, Father, about the thing that came to mind when you're talking about the blood on the cloth, and it comes from like another time period. Is that, you know, the Holy Grail? There's always this like thing about what was really the Holy Grail, and like in French it's like Sang Grail, which means royal blood.
Royal blood.
And they talk about it as because so it just brings it to mind that it's maybe it's saying that there's something about the blood that we need to pay attention to, and that's what's coming out in this evidence. And also it obviously goes into the whole Merovingian bloodline, and it even goes
There's
back
a lot
to
of stories about
mermaids and the people that would put the holes in their head and the mermaid like blood, and that's what the Merovingian blood is.
Yeah.
But
so remember what they used to call blue blood. What was known as blue blood in Europe was blood AB negative. AB negative was considered the blue blood. Remember, rhesus negative blood doesn't fit into evolutionary patterns. Okay, and it's called rhesus negative because the rhesus monkeys and most of the human population in the world have receptors on their red blood cells that come from an evolutionary line from simians, from hominids, from apes and things like that. And then there's a small percentage of the population, around about 15% of the population, mostly in Western and Southern Europe, where there is rhesus negative. This is a completely different kind of blood. Rhesus negative, O negative, A negative, AB negative. I, by the way, am A negative. And it's a very rare kind of blood, and we're not sure what its origin is. It shouldn't exist. It shouldn't.
I always thought you were an alien as well, Father.
Well, I'm O negative, so
I wish. I'd volunteer for abduction.
Take me, please, take me.
Okay, so talking about that, Father, there was something, I was actually having a discussion with someone not too long ago, probably on the weekend, I think it was on the weekend, we were talking about aliens, because whenever I get a chance, I start talking about this whole alien thing. And people are saying, yeah, but that's rubbish because, we've looked into space and we've got telescopes that are seeing this, that, next thing. And I'm saying, but why are you looking in space? So, well, that's where they're coming from. I said, no, they're not. They're not intergalactic. They're interdimensional. There's a very big difference between intergalactic and interdimensional. You're not going to find anything intergalactic because there is nothing. You need to look interdimensional because that is where it is. And they were like,
Lee, you know what? I think it's very precocious of people to say that anything is rubbish, because the reality of the situation is that we know so little. We really don't know. We think, okay, light's traveling at the speed of light to our nearest star, which is Proxima Centauri, traveling at the speed of light, which you can't because you have mass. But light traveling at the speed of light would still take 4.3 years in order for us to get there. That's how far the nearest star away is.
Yeah.
And there's reasons why matter can't travel at the speed of light, because it changes. That is a universal constant. At least we think that is. Remember, the sun is 8 light minutes away from the earth. The sun is so far away. I mean, we're so familiar with it. We feel it's heating it. That heat, that light left the sun 8 minutes before it actually hit us. That's how big and vast space actually is.
Yeah.
Our best rocket engines that we have at the moment could get us to Mars in 6 months if we left when Mars was in the right position, when it comes close to the Earth. It would take us more than 2 years to get to Saturn. So, I mean, so our minds are closed to the possibility of faster than light or warp space and all that kind of thing. But people are seeing things in a single dimension. There are a multiplicity of dimensions, and we can prove that scientifically. Remember, the main scientific hypothesis at the moment is special string theory. And special string theory for the origin of the universe requires at least 11 other dimensions, and there are probably many more, and there are internal dimensions. So that's the scientific point of view. Then you've got Jesus' own words. My Father's kingdom is not of this world. He mentions that all the time.
There we go. That's the bloodline.
And then he says, I'll go to prepare a place for you, for there are many, in my Father's house are many mansions, many dimensions, many worlds that we are not even aware of, inner dimensions, outer dimensions. And so we need to just expand our perceptions a little bit and understand that what we perceive with our 5 little senses is a fraction of reality, and probably not even the most important aspects of reality. So whatever these things that are visiting us are, whether they are actually the automaton servants of the archons that actually govern this holographic projection, if that's what it is. I mean, we don't even know if that's true. If you think about it, what do we actually know for sure? Very little. Very little at all. We don't know who we are. We don't know what we are. We don't know where we come from. We don't know where we're going through. We are so limited. And then we don't have the correct perspective. Whether they are aliens from other star systems or whether they are interdimensional beings, they are certainly not us. And and I think that they've always actually been there. Assuming that it's alien assumes that it's not from this world, but I think that this world is more than what we are able to perceive, and it's more than likely that they are from this world or inner dimensions of this world. So it's a distinct possibility.
So there's also another thing where just coming back to the shroud again, where Jesus was beamed up. So he there was some explosion of light, and like listening to you, it sounds like he disappeared. Like that was him disappearing, or he got a healing. So I just wanted, because it made me think about. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but Mark's version of the gospel, it ended on 16 verse 8, where basically, because the oldest one they can find, it ended on verse 8, and they said that in that verse it just said that they rolled the stone away. They went inside. There was a guy dressed in white there, and he said, "He has risen." and then they like left, and then the woman got scared and they ran away. So they didn't actually see Jesus; he had disappeared already or whatever. So that what makes me feel okay. Well, that he got beamed up, and that's where he left. And then only verses 9 to 20 got added in later, where they made up all of the other stuff, like him actually being there and like being seen and coming, or whatever the other verses were. But those were all added in later. So that was just
William,
so
we have to acknowledge one thing. We have to acknowledge that without any doubt, the scriptures have been tampered with. There is no doubt about it now. The scripture the original version of that gospel comes from the Sinaiticus, the one that they got from the monastery in Sinai. And yes, it appears that scribes added things later on. And we've discussed this at length as well. What was the true teachings of Jesus Christ? I mean, we know of the Gnostic scriptures that were anathema and thrown away, and at the Council of Nicaea, they chose only 4, and they're almost throughout the book of Revelations, yada, yada, yada. This has definitely been tampered with, and Christ's teachings have definitely been utilized for political control. There's no doubt in my mind about that at all. That is why I give special reverence to some of the Gnostic Gospels, because I think that that's possibly closer to what Jesus was actually teaching. However, here we have something that is from age appropriate, comes from that time, comes from that place, and shows something that is recorded in the Gospels. The other Gospels don't say what, they don't agree with each other 100%. What it seems to be is that he wasn't necessarily beamed up. What it could be is that when the soul re-entered the body, there was this expression of radiation. What I want you to consider, when they look under extreme magnification to an ovum, a human ovum, and a sperm cell comes along, and the minute that they link, there's that radiant, there's a release of light. Okay, we're not sure what it is, what causes it. There could be spiritual reasons for it. That is what we possibly
imagine. Your sperm came out with a little cloth, and it was like it was imprinted on the
well,
cloth.
you see, what you're seeing is the return of the soul. What we think is happening at that point of conception is the entrance of the soul, which would create that. Now, if his soul came back because he died, it says that he went down to the underworld, to Sheol, which, by the way, is not the same as the medieval hell that was created for us by Dante Alighieri. It was more like the Hades of the ancient Greeks. He went down there and he rose again on the third day. That is the belief. And when the soul re-entered, this happened. And it created the image. Maybe even that image was created on purpose for us now. In a time of doubt, all of a sudden we've got something that shows, not 100% conclusively, but certainly points to evidence that this did happen. The other Gospels do speak of the disciples and the Magdalene and all that, meeting with him afterwards in a resurrected form before he ascends. So the resurrection's not the ascension. They are different things. The ascension could be what we would possibly describe as a dimensional shift, like this. Removed from our particular dimension, directly translated into a higher vibrational dimension. We don't have all the answers. What we do have is something very special, supernatural happened here. This is not part of the natural way of things. So this is therefore supernatural. I believe it, but I was a Christian before all of this came out. So this just shows me that this is possibly a true story, and that we maybe shouldn't be doubting as much as what we do. Everything that this man said was right, was correct, the teachings that are ascribed to him. But having said that, William, we know that scripture was tampered with, that his true teachings were probably Gnostic, very much like John the Baptist's and John the Baptist's followers, the Mandaeans, and that this was used politically. Remember, Constantine the Great was one of 4 contending emperors of the Roman Empire, the East and the West. He killed all the other rivals and established himself as the emperor, and he could very well have used this as a political unifying factor for his empire. And Christianity was reinvented and given an imperial agenda which Jesus would never have supported. And that's the Christianity that we sit with now.
Yeah.
But we're very lucky that alternative forms have become available to us. The Nag Hammadi library, the Gnostic Gospels, and we're able to have insight into a different perspective of his teachings. But still, one can't deny that this is something very special.
No, it is. It's very special and it's very exciting. And it's also made me also question a lot of things I thought about it. But I still, sorry, when I brought that up, I didn't want us to go into the whole thing about the Bible being like tampered with and whatever over again. Because yes, we've spoken about it at such length in the other interviews with you. All I was thinking is that maybe when Mark 16.8, when they walked in there and they said he has risen, maybe he didn't get resurrected and he actually just exploded into light and got the rainbow body like the Buddhists say or whatever, and disappeared. And maybe the Muslims are right and said that he was a person, but he never resurrected. He was on the cross.
Well, what the Quran says is that he was never crucified. That someone else was crucified in his place. That's what Islam says. They call him the Prophet Isa, Nabi Isa. So they respect him and they believe in his second coming. And when he comes again, him and the Mahdi, the final messenger, are going to overthrow Dajjal, the Antichrist, and re-establish the correct order. And Judgment Day will soon follow. So the whole purpose of your podcast is to query and question. And for people that watch your podcast, you do a lot of querying and questioning and some interesting things. So we're doing what we're meant to be doing by bringing this up, by re-looking at it again, by asking the questions. That is what is important, asking the questions. And then humbly also admitting how little we actually know for sure. We exist in a reality that is obviously way beyond what we perceive and our perspective. So these things are possible. This is the strange and mysterious world, after all, is it not?
What a great way to end it. Unless you got another question, Lee.
No. I'm cool. Everything was very
great. So, Father, we'll see you again for the Hunter Dryers.
Yes, we'll do that one. That's about much later. Maybe I'll see you a little bit before then. But I hope it was interesting. I think it was worthwhile.
Extremely interesting. Yeah, I love it.
I think it's worth those that are interested of your viewers to go in and do further investigation, because I can't emphasize enough what beautiful material there is on this. On YouTube, for one. I'm not publishing for YouTube or anything like that. I'm just saying this material is there. Go in and have a look at it. It's worth looking at again. I have my faith. I'm convinced of my faith, but this certainly is something that is an eye-opener and a wonderful revelation.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Father.
I totally agree. Thank you,
Thank you guys very much. Very happy to be on your show again.
Yeah, it's always cool to have you, man. Always cool to have you.
Thank you so much, brother. So wonderful. Okay. So what do you think?
Dude, I was so depressed.
Are you going to church on Sunday?
I was so depressed, dude, when he was telling us the story of like the punishment and what this guy endured. Yeah, I was like,
it was hectic.
I got so depressed, dude. I was like, shame, man. It's like,
to anybody.
Look, I do believe that Jesus existed. I do believe that I believe that he taught different to what people are saying he taught. I don't believe in half the stuff that they were telling, but I do believe that he existed. I believe that he was teaching. Fuck. It was pretty shit, eh?
Yeah, I know. It was. Remember when we covered that book, The Case for Christ, where that lawyer was making the case of how a lawyer would show the proof of Jesus. And he got to the crucifixion, and I was eating a beetroot sandwich. I was listening to it on an audiobook, and he started talking about the crucifixion. But it was like so interesting that it was while I was eating a beetroot sandwich, and I'm like looking down at this plate full of like beetroot juice, looked like blood, and he's going on about he's almost fainted. But it's very disturbing, and also Emperor Constantine.
Yeah.
Did you hear that he didn't want to get baptized on his deathbed? Like he just refused to get baptized. I'd love to
Look,
find a scholar
I
that
know,
would
I
know
know
about this stuff.
that's the whole Christian thing as we know today. I know that he's actually the person that got it as it is today. So he's the one that put
Yeah, I mean,
everything.
he had the whole vision of like him going into battle with the flaming cross on his shield or
Yeah,
something like that,
yeah.
and then he started the whole Christian thing, and then got them into the what was that thing where they put all the priests together and they said, well, now you got to figure out which part of the Bibles we keep and what we
Council of
throw away and
Nicaea.
what we change. Council of
Yeah.
Nicaea. But then afterwards, he didn't even want to get baptized. Like even on his deathbed, when he was busy dying, they were like, "Okay, well, we better baptize you now." And he was like, "No, I'm not doing that." Yeah,
Well,
might be.
apparently he saw the cross in the sky. He saw the flaming cross in the sky. That's why he thought. But I think that's probably just a UFO. UFP.
Everything's in the UFOs now.
UAP,
All
buddy.
the UFO podcasts we've been doing, you like
Too many fucking UFOs
brainwashed.
people I've been seeing. Too many people. Too many things happening in the skies.
Wow.
But yeah. But that was
But,
that was
yeah,
very
sweet
cool.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Catch you later.
Yeah. Chat soon, man. Thanks everybody.
Like and
I hope you guys
subscribe,
enjoyed. Yeah. As always, like and subscribe, please. And we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks everybody. Cheers, Will.
Just Lee.